Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Indian Parliament is a blessing of democracy that keeps giving gifts to us by way of knowledge and insights. Don't be confused by just the noise and marpeat and gali-galoj that we see in parliamentary proceedings, because behind these proceedings, a lot of other action goes on. And that's very healthy and robust in a democracy. One of those activities is the meetings of standing committees. And these standing committees then produce reports which are authentic, where various ministries about whom these reports are written have had the opportunity to present their point of view. And these are bipartisan or multi-partisan committees, so they have members from all sides. This long preamble is because today I am talking about the report of the Standing Committee on Defence. So this is the Standing Committee on Defence assessing the demands for grants in the budget. It's an annual thing. However, this one has some highlights, because this also in some ways is an opportunity for the committee, for Parliament to scrutinize the performance of various forces and some aspects of various forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, and now also there is a joint headquarter, in terms of the 13th Defence 5-year plan. I keep telling you that the first Defence 5-year plan was launched by Y.B. Chauhan. When he took over as Defence Minister, he is the modernizer of the Indian Armed Forces. He took over as Defence Minister after V.K. Krishna Menon, and he started the first Defence 5-year plan. This committee has looked at some interesting data besides the year's grants, all that's there. But the big highlight is what they have seen in the 13th Defence 5-year plan period. And that 13th plan is from 17-18 to 21-22. Now, when we see that, the standout finding is on air crashes. We see Indian Air Force crashes, and somehow an impression grows that there are a lot of crashes, that a lot of planes are crashing, or a lot of MiG-21s are crashing. MiG-21s always get a bad name. It is called, sometimes it's an expression I don't allow editorially in any publication I edit, to call it a flying coffin. It's not a flying coffin, it's just a very demanding, unforgiving aircraft, and very old now for an institution like Indian Air Force to use, which is really should be moving into 4th generation, 4.5 generation for the bulk, and looking at 5th generation fighter aircraft, because that's where the frontline air forces are. However, MiGs get this bad name, and several other types also. 3 variants of MiGs we've been flying. In fact, you can say 4. So MiG-21, MiG-29, MiG-23/27, because they are both variants of one. In fact, when you drive to Terminal 3 at Delhi Airport, you will see one of these MiG-23/7 variants hanging there as a commemorative reminder of the service that the aircraft has given the Indian Air Force. Now, look at the number of accidents. The total number of accidents in this 5-year period is 34. These are accidents which led to a complete destruction of the aircraft. The Parliamentary Committee report does not tell us what happened to the flying crew, but it tells you what happened to the aircraft. So 34 aircraft were lost in these 5 years. Again, what was the accident number for each year is interesting, and it looks like it's come down. Generally, it's come down. However, in the final year of this 5-year plan, the number has gone higher. So 1917-18, it's 8. 1918-19, it's 11. See the graphic on your screens. 1920, it's 3, come down. 2021, 3 remains down. And 21-22, it shoots up to 9, right? So that is the one thing. So if you see the graph, it's a bit of a funny graph. It's not even a V or a U, right? It goes a little bit zigzag like that, but it starts out high and it also ends high. So it doesn't give you a trend, but it tells you that accident numbers remain on an average over a 5-year period about 7 per year. Is it high? Is it low? Now, air forces calculate this in terms of the number of hours flown. So generally, they calculate this in terms of 10,000 per 10,000 hours flown. And the Indian Air Force has told the Parliamentary Committee that this has improved greatly, 0.93 crashes per 10,000 hours of flying to now 0.27 crashes to per 10,000 hours of flying. It looks like in the following year it's come down to 0.22. So the number is not going up. Air Force is flying a lot more. And the accident rate has come down, although every time there's an accident, it really hurts us and immediately we worry about the pilot. Then you see a breakup of these crashes. Of these 34 crashes, as you would expect, the largest number is MiG-21. That is 9 aircraft. 9 crashes involved MiG-21s, 4 involved MiG-23-27, 1 MiG-29. So 1 plus 4, 5 and 9, 14. So 14 of the 34 are MiG variants. And that's why you get this impression that the MiGs are crashing a lot more than the others. But also in this period, MiGs also constituted a much larger chunk or section of the Indian Air Force's flying strength or fighter strength compared to other aircraft. Sukhois have had 2 crashes in this period. Mi-17 helicopters have had 4, and Kiran trainers. Kiran is the original, a very old jet trainer that was sort of succeeded by Hawk. Kiran has had 4 crashes, which is high, and Hawk, the more modern trainer, has had 2. Then other numbers I told you, Sukhoi 30 is 2. So trainers together, 4 of Kiran and 2 of Hawk, that is 6. Then you come to Jaguar. Jaguar is 3 aircraft, 1 Mirage and 1 AN-32. Then this report also tells you the cause of these accidents, and that's very interesting. And I would say that's a little bit intriguing as well, because if you see who they hold responsible for these, then for 23 of the 34 crashes, 23 of the 34, you will see the entry that says, see it on your screen, it says HE. HE means human error. In almost all cases, it says HEA. That is HE, human error, air crew, right? That means like a pilot error. Only in one case, it says HES, which means human error, but there was a servicing issue with the aircraft, right? Otherwise, 23 aircraft generally say human error. With 2, while it says human error, it also says technical defect. So there was a technical defect, but the pilot there or the pilot and the co-pilot were not able to recover the aircraft in spite of the technical defect. Only one aircraft, that's the MiG-21, that says human error plus technical defect plus foreign object damage. Foreign object damage is when an aircraft is taking off, sometimes debris gets kicked up by the wheels, aircraft wheels, because aircraft wheels are moving very fast. That's the reason all aviation is meant to keep its runways really clear and clean. If you go to an airbase that says FOD se bache, do this and this to prevent FOD. FOD is foreign object damage. Then there are some other issues. 23, I told you, is human error. Then the next largest cause of these crashes is technical defects. TD, that is 8. So that is 23 and 8 becomes 31. 1 is ascribed purely only to foreign object damage and 1 to a bird strike, right? So once again, you get the count of 34, 23 human error with a couple of those qualifications, 1 human error plus servicing, 1 human error plus technical defect plus foreign object damage, 8 purely because of technical defect, 1 purely because of foreign object damage, and 1 because of a bird strike. This number comes to 33. So what happens to the 34th? The 34th, which is not counted among the cause of crashes, is a Mirage that crashed somewhere in the Bhind region, must have taken off from Gwalior, which is the main base for Mirage 2000s. On 21st of October 2021, the crash took place. The pilot fortunately ejected safely. That is still under investigation. That is more than 3 years on. It is still under investigation. So that is the count of the crashes. Now, besides this crash data, which is very important because it does 2 things. One, it tells you a real picture which counters the general impression that there's a hell of a lot of crashes. Now, it's a lot of crashes. Effectively, the Indian Air Force has lost 2 squadrons worth of aircraft in these 5 years. It doesn't look great, but Air Force flying, particularly fighter flying, is a hazardous profession, and things do go wrong with these machines. There is always scope for improving this further, and I'm sure that is the purpose of these reports and these investigations as well. And a couple of other interesting points that the Parliamentary Standing Committee has made or they have found out. So they did ask the Air Force what was their pilot to cockpit ratio. What that means is, if you have 100 aircraft, how many pilots do we have? Because aircraft can come back. It's like with the airlines. You see, the same plane, the same aircraft does 5 or 6 flights in a day. It goes from Delhi to Mumbai, right? It may go from Mumbai to Ahmedabad, then Ahmedabad to someplace else and someplace else. And at night, it may do a flight to Colombo, like that. So an aircraft is used all the time, a civilian aircraft, which means per aircraft, per cockpit, there have to be a lot of pilots. Now, combat aviation doesn't always fly like that. It doesn't fly like civil airliners. At the same time, how many pilots do you have per cockpit is a very important measure, because larger the number of pilots you have per cockpit, the more capable you are of sustaining your operations. Suppose you have intense operations over 10, 15, 20, 30 days, then there will be pilot fatigue. Same pilots will be going up and coming back. There will be casualties, there will be ejections. So all of that will happen if you don't have sufficient number of pilots per cockpit. Then your operations could begin to get run down in the course of time. That is the reason pilot to cockpit ratio is important. Now the Standing Committee tells us that Indian Air Force's pilot to cockpit ratio for fighter aircraft is 1.25. What that means is, for 100 cockpits in fighter aircraft, Indian Air Force has only 125 aircraft. Is that high? Is that low? If it's low, how low is it? All of these things are relative. So you need comparisons. Anyway, let me give you the full data first. For fighters, it's 1.25, which means, to simplify it for all of us, 125 pilots for every 100 cockpits. For transport aircraft, it's 1.5, so 150 pilots for 100 cockpits. For some of the helicopters, the big ones, B-26, which at this point are under refurbishment, they are the biggest helicopter in the world, although it runs on one rotor. Sometimes when you land in Chandigarh, you can see those parked there. Right now, it's going through a massive retrofit and a life cycle extension and a retrofit. So it's a very small fleet, but for those and also Cheetah and Chetak, the ratio is very poor. It's 0.75. That is 75 pilots per 100 aircraft. For Mi-8, Mi-17, the bigger Russian/Soviet origin helicopters, it's 1. Once again, not really satisfactory, but 1. What's the comparison? Now, the Parliamentary Committee says that they checked out from open sources in many categories, the US Air Force, from wherever they could find the data, particularly for transports, it's about 3:1, and the US Air Force is increasing it further. So obviously, Indian Air Force is lagging behind, but more importantly, they raised the question of what is this ratio for Pakistan Air Force, and that ratio is 2.5. So for fighter aircraft, Pakistan has twice as many pilots per aircraft or per 100 aircraft as the Indian Air Force does. Of course, Indian Air Force has given its explanations in the report. I will share a copy of the report with you. It's a public document. Please read this carefully, particularly if you are a nerd. And they've also given details of the measures they are taking to make up for this shortage and to get more pilots in and to train more pilots. There are also details of Indian Air Force's training academies for pilots, etc. In the middle of all this, another point which is quite central to this, and that is the officer strength in the Air Force. Now, they've asked this of all the forces. I particularly focused on the Air Force because there was a question of pilot strength as compared to the number of cockpits. So the number of officers sanctioned for the Indian Air Force is 12,929. The number of officers they actually have is 11,916. So there is a shortage of 1,013 officers, and this is not counting medical, dental, etc. These are purely officers in other areas, operational areas. So there is a shortage of 1,013, which is almost a shortage of 10% in the officer corps. So that's a significant thing. As far as the Air Force is concerned, I will stop here. There is a lot there about the Tejas, the induction, the delays, all the weapon systems being worked on. All of that stuff is there. You should check it out. How many airfields have night operational facilities, right? How many airfields are now going to add night operational facilities, the new air bases that are being built, etc., etc. There's a lot of detail there. Do check it out. I will just jump to just one more point. I'm not talking about the Navy or the Army in any detail, but just looking at budget allocations and spending. Armed forces always complain, and we always complain editorially, that India's defense budgets have to go up. Armed forces have to be given more money to spend. The question that then arises, do they have the capacity to spend? Or how much is the administrative or procedural cholesterol which is clogging the pipeline for this spending? It looks to me as if the Navy and the Air Force are pretty good at spending whatever they get, right? Some years they spend a bit less than they were allocated. The other year they spend a lot more, so they pretty much make up for it. You can see those figures in the report. They pretty much spend what is allocated to them and demand more. Look at the Army. It's quite surprising. For the Army, revised estimates for every year, the Army actually demands a lot more. Army makes a large projection, then an allocation is made which is much less than that projection, but mostly it isn't even able to spend what's been allocated to it, which is in any case much less than what it had projected. So I'll just read these figures for you, and you will also see a graphic on your screens. 2019-20, Army's projection was some 46,000 crores, allocation was 29,666 crores, Army spent 29,000 crores, so 666 effectively was given back. And you know what happens with any government, or what happens with any cashier, right? Or anybody who manages the treasury or the cash box, anything you don't spend goes back to them. So whatever was allocated to you and you haven't spent then goes back. And next year you come back with your fresh demands. The next year, 2020-21, Army demanded 39,000. I'm just rounding it off. They were allocated 33,000, but they spent only 26,000, right? I'm rounding off the figures. So a lot of the money was left unspent from what was allocated to them, which was in any case much less than what they had projected. 2021-22, Army projected 38,344 crores. They were allocated 25,377 crores. I must say, at least in this year, they spent most of it. So 25,130 crores was actually spent. 21-22 would also pertain to the post-Ladakh tension. So Ladakh tension has come in. Army is moving up its resources to the Himalayas. And a lot of quick acquisitions are taking place. So that year, they've spent their full amount. Next year, they've done a little bit better. Next year, they demanded 32,598. They were given all of it, because right now we are living under that period of China tension. In fact, they demanded 32,598.49 crores. What was their allocation? 32,598.49 crores. So their demand was met to the last decimal point. And this year the Army has done quite well. So they have spent 36,616 crore, which is considerably more than what their allocation was. But barring this year, every year they have fallen behind, they've fallen short. Even for 23-24, the most recent year for which data is available now, because 24-25 is still going on. For 23-24, they demanded 33,412, government allocated to them exactly what they demanded. 33,412.16 crores demanded, 33,412.16 crores allocated. But they spent only 28,613.45 crores. So look at this chart, and once again, these are questions that the Army will be asking itself, and these are also questions that the Defense Ministry will be debating, because what is it that is clogging this pipeline of the Army spending when the Army needs so much modernization? And after the lessons of Ukraine war and the lessons also learned from this quick deployment, wonderfully quick deployment, brilliant deployment in eastern Ladakh. The army also knows that there are many areas where they need to upgun or increase firepower, etc. So this is one more important takeaway from this report. There is much else, as I told you. Please go over it in detail, and also Snehesh, Alex, Philip, in the course of time, will be mining it for many stories.